workers. I'm Dr. Chris Rapoff of QME Continuing Education, and welcome to this week's presentation. Well, with the ever increasing cost of temporary total disability in California's workers' compensation system, it has become a real concern for both the employers and the employees in the state. Well, I put together a presentation today titled Tackling the High Cost of TTD in California Workers' Compensation System, specifically the permanent and stationary date and its effect on TTD. So we'll take a look at how establishing a permanent and stationary date for an injured worker in California actually does affect the cost of temporary total disability. I think you'll be surprised when you find out just how much it could cost. Before we get started, first let's take a look at the following sources that I referenced when producing this presentation. Feel free to copy and paste these links into your browser if you'd like to read more about the increasing cost of TTD and California's workers' compensation system. First, let's cover some basic facts. When an employee is injured on the job, workers' compensation allows the employee to receive temporary disability benefits while being off work and recovering from the injury's effects. Now, temporary disability payments typically are 2/3 of the pre-tax wages that the employee will lose while recovering from the job-related injury, up to a statutory maximum amount, which are California's TTD rates, which we'll discuss. Those benefit amounts usually change every year, except in 2024 when the rates went unchanged. And that was because the TTD rate must be increased by an amount that's equal to the percentage increase in the state average weekly rates as compared to the prior year. And there was no substantial change in the percentage, so therefore there was no raise. In the next couple of slides, we're going to discuss some key points with regard to the TTD and permanent and stationary declaration. Now, the DWC recently announced that the minimum and maximum temporary total disability payments will increase in January 1st of 2025. The state average weekly wage is the weekly wage in California paid to their employees who are covered under the unemployment insurance for the 12 months ending on March 31st in the year preceding the injury, as reported by the U.S. Department of Labor. So practically speaking, in the 12 months ending March 31st of 2024, the weekly wage state average increased from $16.42 to $17.04 per week. And that was about a roughly 3.77% increase. Now this means that the TTD rates will increase by that same percentage. So the minimum TTD weekly rate will raise or increase from $252 from $242, $10 per week. And also the maximum rate will increase to $16.80 per week from $16.19 per week. Now under Labor Code 4659C, workers with the date of an injury on or after January 1 of 2003 who are receiving a life pension or permanent total disability payments benefits are also entitled to have their weekly life pension or permanent total disability rate adjusted based on those new averages by the state average weekly wage department. So initially, some key points, we discussed the TTD rates. Now we'll discuss the cost drivers. Now, the high cost of TTD is driven by several factors, including the rising cost of medical care, which is no surprise, longer recovery times, and the increasing number of claims. Additionally, the involvement of attorneys in claims can also contribute to higher costs, which is no surprise either. Now, also the impact on the employers. What impact do these rates have? Well, employers are faced with increased premiums and administrative costs due to the high cost of the TTD claims. Now, this can impact their bottom line and their overall competitiveness. And finally, the impact on the employees. While the TTD benefits provide crucial financial support to the injured workers, the high cost can lead to an increased scrutiny of the claims and potential delays in claims in receiving the benefits, or initially a denial and then having to reapply for these benefits. Now, addressing these high costs requires really a multifaceted approach, which includes preventive measures to reduce workplace injuries, also efficient claims management, and the ongoing evaluation of the workers' compensation system to ensure that it does remain fair and sustainable. But what about another major factor in TTD payments? Let's take a look. Okay, so let's take ourselves back to the last QME report that we were working on, and we were addressing the questions that were posed by the attorneys and the claims administrator in their cover letters. Now, think about the questions regarding the permanent and stationary or maximum medical improvement status of the examinee. Have you really considered why the permanent and stationary section is broken down into two separate yet related questions? Number one, is the applicant permanent and stationary or at MMI? And number two, what is the date that they became or will become permanent and stationary? There actually really is a method to the attorney's questions madness. So you may ask, well, how does this apply to TTD? It applies drastically, and let's take a look. So, in understanding the importance of establishing a permanent and stationary date for an injured worker in California, we will learn here, and we're going to discuss how crucial it is to the workers' compensation system for several reasons, which we'll touch on in the next couple slides. First, the evaluation of a permanent disability. So once an injured worker reaches the P&S date, their condition is considered stabilized and unlikely to improve further, which is the definition of permanent and stationary according to the DWC. Now, this also starts the trigger. It allows for an accurate evaluation of any permanent impairment or disability resulting from the injury, and it allows for a clear assessment of the injury's long-term impact. Number two, it ends total disability payments. Once the permanent and stationary date is established, the injured worker is no longer eligible for temporary disability benefits. This helps transition the focus from temporary recovery to long-term management and compensation. Now, this also helps to prevent the accumulation of ongoing TTD payments, which can be costly for the employers and the insurers, which I'll demonstrate in just a couple slides from now. Now, let's talk about the transition to and the calculation of permanent disability benefits. After a permanent stationary date has been established, the focus then shifts to evaluating and compensating for any permanent disability resulting from the injury, and that triggers a QME examination. Now, this ensures that the injured worker receives the appropriate long-term benefits without continuing the TTD benefits that stop when the permanent stationary date is established. The P&S date also is used as a reference point to calculate permanent disability benefits. It helps determine also the extent of the injury's impact on the worker's ability to perform their job and earn a living. Additionally, in cost control, by clearly defining a P&S date, the workers' compensation system then can better manage and control the costs associated with the TTD payments. This helps maintain the financial sustainability of the system and reduces the burden on the employers. Also, future medical care. A permanent and stationary report will include information on medical care that the injured worker may need in the future. This ensures that the ongoing medical needs are addressed and covered by the workers' compensation system. Now, continuing on the importance of a correct permanent and stationary date declaration, we come to settlement and closure. Now, establishing a P&S date allows for the potential settlement of the claim through a stipulated award or compromise and release. Now, this can provide closure for both the insured worker and the employer. And finally, claims efficiency. Establishing a P&S date also streamlines the claims process and allows for a smoother transition from temporary to permanent disability payments. Now, this can lead to more efficient claims resolution and more effective cost management. So it is a win-win for everyone. Now, I mentioned to you earlier that we would be taking a more practical approach and a look at the reason why the permanent and stationary data declaration is important. So I'm providing an example here in a table. And using the 2024 TTD rates that are actually in effect today, just to remind you, the minimum TTD rate is $242 per week, and the maximum is $1,619 per week. So let's say that the worker falls somewhere in between, but I wanted to give you both extremes. So Dr. QME declares that the examinee to be P&S on the date of my evaluation. Okay, so let's say that you issue your QME report, and less than a month later, you receive a request for a supplemental report. And the attorneys provide you with additional medical records to review, potentially. And also, one of the questions they ask you is to review your permanent and stationary date based on the new information in the medical records, and ask if the new information causes you to change your opinion on the date of permanent and stationary for this applicant. I'm sure you've had these questions and these requests, and you ask yourself, why would they be willing to pay for a supplemental report of at least $650 just to ask me to reconsider my permanent and stationary date declaration for this examinee? Well, here you go. Based on the 2024 TTD rates, I calculated potential savings for the defense. If you were to even change your permanent and stationary declaration for 1 month earlier than your date of valuation, and then I calculated 3 months earlier, 6 months earlier, and finally 12 months earlier. The numbers here are based on an average of 4.3 weeks per month. Now, as you can see by the table, the overall savings can really add up by controlling the cost of the TTD payments that go out. So yes, it's well worth the expense of that supplemental report if the facts presented are adequate for you to change your P&S declaration. Now, as you can see, this table, they would save, if they were to receive the maximum and you were to declare a permanent and stationary date of 12 months prior to the date of your evaluation, based on potentially some new information, they would be saving over $83,000 just in TTD payments alone. Wow. Based on that last slide that we took a look at in that table, I think it was pretty enlightening. And I think I can imagine that many of you now realize just how important it is for the permanent and stationary date declaration to be correct for each and every applicant in your QME report. And today you can see just for yourselves how this declaration played such a vital role in balancing the needs of the injured workers with the financial realities of the workers' compensation system. Now, just by providing an accurate permanent and stationary declaration for the applicant, you're actually helping everyone. You're ensuring that the benefits are provided appropriately while controlling the costs and preventing unnecessary financial strain on the employers and the insurers, which substantially affects the TTD benefits that are paid out, as you saw. Well, doctors, I'm Dr. Chris Rapoff, and I wanted to thank you for taking the time once again to join me in this presentation. And I encourage you to join me next time as I discuss important aspects as they relate to our roles as QMEs in California's workers' compensation system. Until then, thank you.